Hello and welcome to my specialization introduction and outdoor content guide for the Destruction Warlock in World of Warcraft Battle for Azeroth. If you haven't watched the primer video for this series, I recommend you do that. There'll be a link to that in the description below. That video will just get you up to speed on what we're doing in this video and kind of help you understand why. So we're here on our Destruction Warlock. We've got our action bars visible and empty. If we go into our talent tree, these are the talents you can select to fulfill the requirements laid out in the primer video. Now that we've got that set up, we'll hop into our spell book and start sorting our spells. I won't go in great depth with every single one of these abilities, but I will at least give a brief description of what the ability does so you can be familiar with it and understand why it's going into the section that it is. We're starting off with Banish. This is a crowd control ability that you can only use on demons, aberrations, and elementals. It will basically make it so that for 30 seconds they can't do anything. Chaos Bolt is part of our core rotation. Command Demon is an ability that's going to change based on the demon we have summoned. So we're going to come back and talk about this one later when we talk about our actual demons. So we're just going to put this off to the side for now. Conflagrate is part of our core rotation. Create Health Stone will allow us to create 3 charges of a Health Stone, which acts like a potion that will restore 25% of our health. That's something we want to have going before we get into combat, so we'll put that over here in our miscellaneous spells section. We also have Create Soul Well, and this puts something on the ground so that party and raid members can click it and they can get Health Stones as well. So that also goes over there. Next, we have Demonic Gateway. This is a combat utility ability. It allows us to create a gateway between 2 locations, and when we activate the gateway, it'll transport us to the other gateway. So it's something we can kind of set up and use if we need to. We can only use it once every 1.5 minutes, however. Drain Life is part of our core rotation. Enslaved Demon will allow us to control a target demon for 5 minutes. This goes over in our miscellaneous section because we won't always be in an area where we can use this ability, and even if we're going to, we're going to want to set it up before we get into combat, so we'll put that over here. Eye of Kilrog will summon a eyeball demon that is fast, stealthed, and super fragile, but it will attach our vision to that creature and we can use it to scout out an area and see what's going on. Fear is a crowd control ability that will fear an enemy. Havoc is a combat utility ability. It basically allows us to mark a target, and then when we cast single target abilities, they will also hit the target of the Havoc spell. So essentially it lets us turn our single target abilities into 2 target abilities. Health Funnel is a combat utility ability. It allows us to sacrifice 25% of our health to heal our summoned demon for twice as much. Immolate's part of our core rotation. Incinerate is part of our core rotation. Rain of Fire is part of our core rotation. Ritual of Summoning allows us to put a portal down that will then allow you to summon allies to your location. Shadow Fury is a crowd control ability. It's an AoE stun. Soul Stone will allow us to store either our soul or a party or raid member's soul. And what this does is if you were to die, you can use the Soul Stone to come back to life with 60% health and 20% mana. That you will usually want to set up before you get into combat, before something happens. Next, we have our Summon Demon menu. This will let us select from the demons available to us. As a Destruction Warlock, we have 4, and we'll talk about those later. We have Summon Infernal. This is a long cooldown. You can put it into offensive or defensive cooldowns depending on how you want to use it most of the time. But this will summon an Infernal from the Twisting Nether. It'll deal some AoE damage and stun enemies for 2 seconds. Then it will stick around and deal a bunch of damage to all nearby targets as well. And it will generate some of our main resource for us. So I'm going to put it under offensive cooldowns because that's probably how I would use it. Unending Breath will allow you or whoever you cast it on, friendly target, to breathe underwater and increase their swim speed by 20%. So this is a nice ability to use if you're out, traveling or you're doing some underwater questing. Mainly, you're going to want to cast this, outside of combat and get that going. So we'll put that over with our miscellaneous abilities. And then finally, we have Unending Resolve. This is a defensive cooldown that will give us a nice chunk of damage reduction and make us immune to interrupt and silence effects as well. So that is all of the core spells for the Destruction Warlock. So let's talk about the resources available to the Destruction Warlock. You have 2 resources, more like 1.5. You have mana. You start with a certain amount of mana depending on the amount of intellect you have. You will use mana to cast spells, but out in the open world, it's almost impossible to run out of mana, so it's almost like there isn't a resource there that you have to worry about. But in the rare occasion that you do run out of mana, you will be unable to cast some of your spells. So that's one of your resources. Your main resource, however, are these purple crystals here. These are called soul shards, and you passively regenerate up to 3 of them when you're out of combat. You can have a maximum of 5, and you're going to spin these to cast your most powerful spells. Now, the Destruction Warlock generates these a little bit different than the other Warlocks do. The other Warlock specializations will generate whole soul shards. So if you use an ability, you may generate 1 soul shard. However, the Destruction Warlock generates soul shard fragments. So you will generate pieces of a soul shard that will then add up to a whole that you can then spend on abilities. So you'll have abilities that cost soul shards to use, then you'll have abilities that will generate soul shard fragments in order to get you back up so that you can spend those on those abilities that are using soul shards again. So let's take a quick look at a couple of the passive abilities for the Destruction Warlock. We have our soul shards. Many of our spells will generate fragments. We consume those to cast spells, and when we're out of combat, we'll regenerate up to 3 soul shards. We have Soul Leech, so single target damage done by us or our minions will grant all of us shields that absorb up to 8% of the damage we dealt for 15 seconds, up to 10% of maximum health. So as we deal single target damage, as our pets deal single target damage, we will get these shields, which will help increase our survivability. Next, we have our Mastery, which is Chaotic Energies. Your spells deal increased damage plus a random amount up to, in this case, 18.4% additional increased damage. Also, you take reduced damage plus a random amount up to 4.1% additional reduced damage. So basically what this does, it gives us a guaranteed flat increase to damage and increase to damage reduction, and also a random increase to our damage and our damage reduction. Kind of goes with the whole chaotic energies. Destruction Warlocks are utilizing chaos energy and fire and shadow and all these things, and it's all kind of, in flux and strange. So that's why we have this kind of very flavorful passive. And then we do have another one called Backdraft, which we will talk about in a minute after we go over our core rotation. So as a Destruction Warlock, you're going to start combat with your 3 soul shards, and basically you're going to want to make a choice. Do I spend soul shards, or do I try to generate soul shards? Now usually what you're going to want to do is you're going to start combat by opening up with a Chaos Bolt. Chaos Bolt will cost you 2 soul shards. It does a ton of damage and is always going to critical strike. The damage of the Chaos Bolt increases the more critical strike you have. So since it's always a critical strike, if you're trying to get critical strike for your other abilities, that stat is not useless for Chaos Bolt because it will increase the damage. So if we open up with Chaos Bolt, we're down to 1 soul shard, and we're going to want to start generating soul shards. And we're going to do that by casting, first off, Immolate. Immolate is going to burn the enemy and it's going to do a little bit of damage and then put another damage over time debuff on the enemy that's going to do a pretty good amount of damage over the course of 18 seconds. Periodic damage done by this ability has a 50% chance, periodic damage generates one soul shard fragment and has a 50% chance to generate an additional one on critical strikes. So this is one of the main ways we're going to get our soul shards back, because every time this ability does its damage over time damage, we will get a soul shard fragment. After that, we can cast Incinerate. Incinerate is our main sort of spammable ability. It's going to generate 2 soul shard fragments and an additional one if we critically strike. So those 2 abilities will generate soul shard fragments for us. And then we also have Conflagrate. Conflagrate's an instant cast ability with a 11-second recharge time. It deals damage to the target, and it will reduce the cast time of our next Incinerate, which is our spammable ability, or our next Chaos Bolt, which is our big, heavy, hard-hitting ability, by 30% for 10 seconds. It also generates 5 soul shard fragments, and you can have 2 charges of it at any one time. After that, we do have another way to spend our soul shards, and we could do that with Rain of Fire. Rain of Fire costs 3 soul shards, and it basically just does a bunch of damage to all enemies in an area. So if we look at this, you could, and we'll change this up just a little bit here. You can open up with your Immolate, get that going right away, or you can open up with your Chaos Bolt if you already have the soul shards, because it's probably going to just about kill whatever you're targeting. So that's entirely up to you based on the type of enemy that you're fighting. So for our purposes, we'll go ahead and we will cast Immolate first to start getting those soul shards. Then we will spend soul shards on either Chaos Bolt if we're attacking a single enemy, or Rain of Fire if we're attacking multiple enemies. After we've spent some soul shards, we will start using our Incinerate to regenerate some soul shard fragments, and we can use our Conflagrate to both generate soul shard fragments and also reduce the cast time of really our next Chaos Bolt. Our Chaos Bolt has a long cast time, but it does a lot of damage, so we're going to want to essentially use Conflagrate and then use Chaos Bolt. And the rest of the time, probably just use Incinerate. Now, we do have one other ability that's part of our core rotation, which is Drain Life. Anytime you're in a situation where you need to heal, you can use Drain Life to deal damage, and it will heal you for 500% of that damage dealt. So let's go down and take a look at how this works. So in our scenario, let's say we knew this was going to be a little bit of a tougher enemy, so we didn't want to just try to insta-kill it with Chaos Bolt. We'd come down and we would open up with Immolate. Alright, so that's going to start generating some soul shard fragments, and you can see our soul shards starting to fill there. Then we could use our Chaos Bolt, our big old chunky Chaos Bolt. Boom. And now that we've spent some soul shards, let's go ahead and make sure we've got our Immolate on there. We'll start using our Incinerate. And this is going to help us to more rapidly generate our soul shards so that we can use those on another Chaos Bolt. Now what we want to do here is, as we're getting close to maxing out our soul shards, we're going to want to make sure that we are getting ready to spend them appropriately. So what I mean by that, and what I'm going to do here, is just get rid of a few soul shards with a Chaos Bolt. Okay, so we're going to cast our Immolate. We cast our Chaos Bolt at the start of combat. We start spamming our Incinerate to help build up those soul shard charges. As we're starting to get up there, what we're going to want to do is hit Conflagrate. That gives us our backdraft buff. Then we can hit our Chaos Bolt for a reduced cast time, spend those soul shards, get our Immolate back up, start spamming our Incinerate again, cast our Conflagrate. We've got 2 soul shards, use our reduced cast time Chaos Bolt, go back over, make sure we keep Immolate up, start spamming that Incinerate again. When we get pretty close to our 2 soul shards, we can hit our backdraft or our Conflagrate, get our backdraft buff, and then cast our Chaos Bolt again. And that's kind of the cycle that you'll do on a single target. It's pretty simple. And the reason you're doing that is because by the time you get to Chaos Bolt, the fact that it critically strikes, it usually does a huge portion of the enemy's health. And between the Immolate damage over time damage, and then the initial Chaos Bolt you do, or if for some reason you can't cast it, the Incinerate plus the Conflagrate damage, that Chaos Bolt is probably going to kill the enemy that you're targeting. So it's a very simple rotation, but that's mainly because Chaos Bolt does a ton of damage. Now, in a situation where we are attacking, 3, 4, 5 targets, you're going to want to hit your Immolate. You could put that up on more than one enemy, and that's going to increase how fast you're generating soul shards. When you have 3, you're going to want to spend it on your Rain of Fire, and this is going to start doing AoE damage to all the targets in that area. You start casting your Incinerates, get yourself back up to 3. You can spend those Conflagrates to help get you there, so that you can then cast your Rain of Fire again and continue that damage, or that AoE damage. So that is essentially how the rotation is going to work. Pretty straightforward. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to jump into the talent tree and create a build that works well in open world content. As you can see, this kind of core rotation is fairly simple, so we're going to see what we can do to spice that up and also make sure that the build has applicable tools to help us out in the open world. So we'll get that set up here. Okay, let's get these off of here for now. Alright, so this is the build that I recommend you use in open world content. It's not the only build that you can use, but it's the one I recommend, and we'll be showing off at the end of this video. We're going to go through each of the talents and talk about what it does and why we chose it for the build, starting with Flashover. So Flashover, our Conflagrate, which is our instant cast ability that reduces the cast time of our Chaos Bolt, deals 25% increased damage and grants an additional charge of backdraft. So, let's take a look at this real quick, and we can see here that if we cast our Conflagrate, we get 2 stacks of backdraft, which means that our Chaos Bolt is now down to a 1-second cast. We can cast this again, we've got 4 stacks, so our Chaos Bolt is down to a 1.8. There we go. With those 4 stacks, we can get a lot of quick Chaos Bolt casts in addition to the extra 25% damage that we're going to get from each of our Conflagrates. Reverse Entropy, our spells have a chance to grant us 15% haste for 8 seconds, which means we're going to be able to cast our Incinerates faster and generate those soul shards a lot faster. And then when we do cast our Chaos Bolts, we'll have that haste to help us cast those faster as well. Casting faster as a Destruction Warlock is pretty much always good. Next, we have Burning Rush. This is a combat utility ability. When you toggle it on, it gives you 50% increased movement speed until you toggle it off. Now, the caveat to that is whenever this is toggled on, you will take 4% of your maximum health as damage every second. So it's up to you to balance, how long you want to use this for to travel whatever distance you need to. versus how much health you need to have before you start the next fight. But this is a great utility movement speed buff for the Destruction Warlock, because Warlocks in general don't have a lot of ways to increase their movement speed or their movement capability. So having an ability like this will help quite a lot. Also, you can always use this and then start combat by using your Drain Life to get your health back as well. Next, we have Fire and Brimstone. Incinerate now hits all enemies near your target for 40% damage and generates 1 Soul Shard fragment for each additional enemy hit. So what this does is it makes our Incinerate go from a single target ability to a multiple target. So now, as you can see, we are able to hit both targets and we get a Soul Shard fragment for each target we hit. So if you're in a situation where you're fighting 3 or 4 enemies, this is a great ability to use, because now you'll be generating 3 or 4 Soul Shard fragments with every cast, and that's going to let you ramp up into your Rain of Fire way quicker. Next, we have Demonic Circle. This is an ability that will allow you to first summon a Demonic Circle. So we can do that. It looks like this. And then if you activate your Demonic Circle teleport, it will teleport you back to this circle. Now, this has some good uses in PvE content, because let's say I was up on this cliff and this was a valley and the entrance was way down there. I could just create my circle, drop down into the ditch, go do my questing and all that stuff, come back over to the ledge, something like this, hit my Demonic Circle teleport, and now I'm back up on the ledge. So you could use this in a lot of creative ways to basically save you time as you're leveling and questing and farming, maybe help you get to some places that you might not have wanted to go into without an easy way to get out. This is particularly useful when you don't have flying yet. So very useful utility ability that you just have to get kind of creative in order to use. Now, the one thing you want to make sure is that you don't put your circle up on top of a cliff and then drop down and it's over 40 yards and now you can't teleport back up again, because you kind of just wasted that at that point. Next, we have Roaring Blaze. Conflagrate burns the target for an additional 543 fire damage over 6 seconds. So now when we're casting Conflagrate to get that cast time of our Chaos Bolt down, it will deal 25% more damage from Flashover, and we will also get an additional damage over time debuff on the enemy with Roaring Blaze. Finally, we have Channel Demon Fire. This is an ability that we're going to add into our rotation. This launches 15 bolts of Fellfire over 2.6 seconds at random targets afflicted by your Immolate within 40 yards. Each bolt will deal 155 fire damage to the target and 68 to nearby enemies. So this ability allows us to either deal damage to a single target or multiple targets. So if we go ahead and we put our Immolate just on this one training dummy, we can cast Channel Demon Fire and deal a whole bunch of damage to that one target. Now, the good thing about this is on a 19-second cooldown, but, well, 21-second now, because we don't have the haste buff anymore. A 21-second cooldown, but it doesn't cost any soul shards, and it does a bunch of damage. So this gives us the ability to target an enemy whether or not we have soul shards and deal a significant amount of damage to them. Now, what we can also do is we can cast Immolate on 2 targets and then cast Channel Demon Fire, and it will send those bolts out to both targets. So you can also use this to kind of damage multiple targets at the same time if you like. But the main thing is it's a way to deal a lot of damage without having to worry about whether or not we have soul shards. And that's it. That's the build. So with this build, our rotation doesn't really change too much. We're mainly going to keep doing the same thing we were before, except now our Incinerate will hit all targets near our primary target. Our Immolate will be tied into our Channel Demon Fire, so we can do concentrated damage to a particular target that we want. And that is about it. Now, the other thing we need to touch on are the pets available to the Warlock. So as the Destruction Warlock, and if I've been saying demonology, I apologize. Just did that video. The Destruction Warlock has 4 demons available to them. So we have our Imp. Our Imp will deal single damage to the target, and our Command Demon ability, which we talked about earlier, will change depending on the demon we have out. When we have the Imp out, we get Singe Magic. This will burn a harmful spell, removing 1 harmful magic effect from an ally. It's not crazy useful in open world content. Also, since your Imp mainly does single target damage and not a whole lot else, I don't really recommend that you use it. Especially in the case of Destruction, you're doing a lot of big single target damage yourself most of the time, so it's better to have some other utility with you. You have the Fell Hunter. Fell Hunter will attack a single target. This gives you a better Command Demon ability. You get Spell Lock. This is an interrupt that you can use to counter an enemy's spell cast. By default, as a Warlock, you don't have any sort of interrupt ability available to you, so this gives you that and lets you use that against caster targets that you may be fighting, and that's much more versatile, I think, than removing a harmful effect from yourself. Next up, you have Succubus, and the short version for the Succubus is it is a very good PvP pet, not as great in PvE. The ability you get is Seduction. This will disorient a target for 30 seconds. That's not really something you're really worried about in open world content, so I wouldn't recommend that you use it. It's also only usable against humanoids, so it's very limited. The pet that I do recommend that you take is the Voidwalker. The Voidwalker is our big blue friend here, who will both taunt things and tank for you. So this guy will go out there and he will get the attention of the enemies so that they attack him and not you, and you can cast your spells, as you please without having to worry about taking a bunch of damage. Also, the ability you get from the Voidwalker is Shadow Bulwark. This will temporarily increase current and maximum health by 30% for 20 seconds. So a nice little extra defensive cooldown that we can include in there. So that's it. The last thing to talk about is the PvP talents that are available if you want to toggle on war mode and go out there and still mainly focus on PvE. First off, we have Relentless. This will replace your Honorable Medallion, and it will give you 20% reduction on the duration of any crowd control effects on you. So it's a nice set it, forget it, just passive ability you can use, and no matter what sort of crowd control you're taking, that is reduced. Next, we have Focus Chaos. Your Chaos Bolt damage is increased by 65%, but no longer strikes additional targets afflicted by Havoc. So what you can do is you can put Havoc onto a target something else, Chaos Bolt. Your Chaos Bolt will hit both targets. With this, it no longer will do that, but it will just deal 65% increased damage on an ability that already does a ridiculous amount of damage. So this kind of turns your Chaos Bolt into a one-shot, one-kill ability. And that is worth not being able to hit 2 targets with it, with Havoc. Especially considering Havoc is on a 30-second cooldown and only lasts for 10 seconds, whereas you can cast Chaos Bolt as many times as you're able to generate enough soul shards to do it in that time period. Next, we have Cremation. Your Conflagrate, our ability here that we've got buffed with a bunch of our talents, deals up to an additional 3% of the target's maximum health and fire damage if the target is affected by your Immolate. So we are opening combat by putting our Immolate on our target, so we should get that up to 3% maximum health increased damage from that Conflagrate every time. And then Essence Drain. Whenever you heal yourself with Drain Life, the enemy target deals 5% reduced damage to you for 6 seconds, stacks up to 5 times. So generally when you are casting Drain life, you're in one of two scenarios. Either you just sacrificed a bunch of life with health funnel to give it back to your pet, and you just want to get yourself back up to full in case anything goes wrong, or your pet's dead, or you forgot to summon him, or even on passive or something. You're taking a lot of damage, and you're trying to use drain life to stabilize and heal yourself. Well, the problem with that is that drain life does do some damage and heal you for a significant amount, but you know, it's not always enough to keep you from dying, especially when there are multiple enemies attacking you. So with Essence Drain, you can get up to a 25% damage reduction against the main target that is attacking you while you're dealing damage to them, while you're healing, and that makes it into a much better defensive tool that you can use. So that is it for the PvP talents. The next thing to do is take this build out into the open world and try it out. So I'm going to cut to that, and I'll see you there. Alright, so we're here in Surmar City, and we're going to go down and test the build against a couple different types of enemies. So let's go ahead and get off of our mount here so we can get our Voidwalker up. So remember, we're going to open up with our Immolate, get that onto our target. Our Voidwalker will go over and should tank him for us. We can cast our Chaos Bolt. And as you can see, that does a ton of damage. So now we're in a situation where we're starting combat without enough soul shards to cast our Chaos Bolt right away. So we're going to open with Immolate. That's going to generate some shards for us, but since we don't have enough, we could either cast Conflagrate to get a bunch. And that deals a nice chunk of damage because of our talent build. Now we do have enough. This is one of those scenarios where if you think the enemy is weak enough, you can kind of just cast Chaos Bolt right from the outset. Boom, that does a good chunk of his damage. You can see our Incinerate is going to hit both targets now. Get our Immolate up. Start casting our Incinerate. Oh, we got some people coming up here. So we're going to show off our Demon Fire ability. So we're going to cast Immolate on this target, and then we're going to hit Channel Demon Fire, and you can see that killed that enemy very, very quickly. So now we will generate some additional shards here. Alright, we're going to get up to 3, and then we're going to cast Rain of Fire. Deal some AoE damage here. And in these situations, it's always good to go back to casting our Incinerate because it does hit all 3 targets. Once we're down to 1 target like this, depending on the health that's left, we may want to try to cast another Chaos Bolt and kill it off, or we could cast our Conflagrate and finish it off that way. It just depends on the scenario that we're in. So once again, we're going to cast Immolate. If our pet is getting kind of low, we can hit our health funnel. That's going to get him back up to full. And then we can pick a target. So let's say we pick this target here. We can start casting our Drain Life and getting our health back after we have healed our pet. Alright. So as you can see, like, we do get in a situation a lot where we just don't have enough soul shards to cast our Chaos Bolts. But generally, that's going to be okay because we're dealing enough damage with our other abilities, or our Voidwalker is tanking with us enough. So what we're going to do here now is we're going to try this out with several enemies. So let's grab, you know, however many enemies we can here. That should do the trick. And we'll cast our Immolates. We'll cast our Demon Fire, channel that in. We'll get our Rain of Fire going. Our primary target, we're going to start casting Incinerate. We can use our Unending Resolve to give us a health buff. We can cast Drain Life to start getting some health back here. These guys are pretty low, so we're just going to start casting Incinerate until they're dead. There we go. Now we can focus on this one target here. We got another guy coming in here. We can pull him in. We can use our AoE stun, take out those guys. We've got our Demon Fire up again, so we can channel that. Go back into our Immolate. We could pull these guys over too. Why not? We got enough soul shards. We're going to go ahead and cast Rain of Fire. Alright. We're going to cast Immolate on this guy. We're kind of waiting. Hit our Incinerates. Get this nice chunky AoE damage in here. Our demon's almost dead, so we want to heal him up with Health Funnel if we can. Alright. Use some Drain Life. Get our health back up. We can summon our Infernal. Boom. Now we got this guy coming in for us. He's going to give us some soul shards. He's going to stun everything. Going to deal some damage for us. And you can see we just took on a ton of enemies and just kept pulling them in and pulling them in. Now, we did get close there a couple times to our pet dying. And generally, that's something you're going to be able to pay attention to fairly well. I let him get pretty low because I was trying to explain, what's going on with the rotation and everything. But we can easily cast our health funnel, get him back up. And this is also the scenario where it's good to have our health stones. So we could make our health stones, get those out of our backpack, put them up here on our combat utility. We can use one of those. We get 25% of our health back. Also, if for some reason that is a situation where we might have died, we always want to have soul stone on ourselves so that if we do die for some reason, we could just come back to life right where we're at. So that's a little bit of prep work there. And we've got some other enemies here, so let's go ahead. We're going to cast Immolate on the big guy, open up with Channel Demon Fire. That should kill him. Yep. We're going to cast our Incinerates. Let's go ahead and use our Chaos Bolt on this guy. Yep. Alright, get our Immolate going. We'll Conflagrate, and we have enough for a Chaos Bolt there, but we don't want to use it. So we can... we're going to go up and we're going to try to find an elite or a rare spawn or something. Here we go. We got a rare spawn right here. These guys, I'm just going to go down. I'm just going to spam Incinerates until they die. Usually that's pretty good. It's good enough to kill them off. We can go ahead and drain soul on this guy to get some of our health back since we're missing some. And then we're going to talk about what we can do to this guy. Now, we already kind of covered a lot of the cool things you can do as a Destruction Warlock with that big group of enemies that we were attacking. See, here, I'm just letting my Voidwalker tank. I'm casting Drain Life until my health gets all the way back up. I'm using this enemy as kind of like a potion, in a sense. I'm not going to try to kill it super fast. I want to drain life as much as possible, get my health all the way back up. So this target here, we do have enough for 2 Chaos Bolts. So we can actually, what we're going to do is we're going to Immolate into Channel Demon Fire. Then we're going to cast a Chaos Bolt, Conflagrate a couple times. We could Conflagrate to get the cast time of our Chaos Bolts down, but we want to spend some of our Soul Shards. Well, they're gone now, so let's go ahead and Immolate into Demon Fire. You see, this does a ton of damage. Into Chaos Bolts. We can Conflagrate, Chaos Bolt. Alright, there we go. We got some enemies on us again, so these are those easy guys, so we can just cast our Incinerates until they're dead. Could also just spin some Conflagrates for fun to burst some down. Now this guy shows up, we can Immolate into Demon Fire and kill him off. And there you go. That's pretty much it. That's the build. That's how you fight one big single target. That's how you fight a bunch. You've got lots of durability. Really push some heavy single target damage output with the Demon Fire. So yeah, I hope that has given you a better understanding of the Destruction Warlock, and maybe now you have the confidence to get on your own Destruction Warlock, get out there in the open world, start doing some questing, leveling, see if this is a specialization you like and you want to play in Battle for Azeroth. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell, comment, whatever you want to do to keep me encouraged to do these videos. That said, I hope you have a fun time in Battle for Azeroth, and thank you for watching.